Tomorrow, Kim Beazley heads to Washington, D.C. to replace Dennis Richardson as Australia's ambassador to the United States. John Howard gave his leadership rival, Andrew Peacock, the keys to the ambassador's residence in D.C. Now Kevin Rudd is doing the same for Kim Beazley. But even the Liberal opposition says Kim Beazley is eminently qualified and a great fit for this job. Kim Beazley, welcome to Breakfast.
Good to be with you, Fran. Probably for the last time,
yes,
at least in person.
For a long time anyway. Well, I hope not for the last time, absolutely. We'd love to talk to you there from the ambassador's residence. Look, this news from overnight that the US president is planning to visit here in March, it's always significant when an American president visits. What will make the Obama visit stand out?
Well, look, I think that there is, and this is one of the things that surprised me in the briefings I've done in the last few months, is the relationship between Australia and the United States has achieved a level of depth that is that much greater than it was in the 1980s, when I was more directly engaged with it, which has taken me aback slightly. There is a huge agenda to be discussed between Kevin Rudd and Barack Obama. And one of the important developments, I think, over the course of the last 12 months is that the Prime Minister and the President have established, if you like, a degree of cerebral communication, which means, A, they're interested in the same topics, B, they have very similar approaches to them, and C, they can reinforce each other's best initiatives, if you like.
A degree of cerebral communication. I wonder how that compares with... well, we all remember George W. Bush describing John Howard as a man of steel. Their relationship was clearly very... They are close personal friends. Visceral relationship.
Yeah, that's right.
How would you describe characterise the Rudd-Obama relationship?
Cerebral. That is the style of the men. And both of them respect ideas, respect detail related to those ideas, and respect a sort of intellectual approach to problem solving. And I think they've through that process they've found a level of compatibility, as opposed to finding it perhaps through mutual engagement in a confrontation or a problem, as was the case with John Howard and George W. Bush, a very close relationship as well.
Perhaps it doesn't need to come down necessarily to the bond between the two men, but the bond between the countries, because this visit from the President is to mark the 70th anniversary of Australia's strategic relationship, close strategic relationship with the US. How would you characterise the alliance today?
Well, it's a very strong alliance, and it still has a very strong military component to it, which is how it was when it started off. I'd say the alliance now was probably even more important to Australia in defence terms than it was then. In these days, it means most in the component of it which is scientific and intelligence-oriented in the collaboration between us. And basically, if you're a small nation in the region in which we operate, the terms and conditions of your survival is that you're capable of doing a lot of things very well. And a relationship at that level with the United States is important in maintaining that capability in Australia. So I think you'll find, at least from our side of the Pacific, we will think there's a fair bit to celebrate in the 70th anniversary.
All very well. We do work very closely, and particularly in the last few years, on military matters, no doubt about that, but over the 70 years. But when it comes to trade, the congressional doors aren't always as open as they are with military and security matters. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, but it's better than it was. And I think the free trade agreement was important there. Now, in relation to agricultural product, we still have many issues with them, and one of the jobs I'm going to have when I'm in Washington is pursuing our position in relation to their continued subsidies of their agricultural exports. It's an important issue for us, and it is an issue of disagreement between us, and I strongly suspect will continue to be through the 3 years that I'm there. So that's something I can't neglect. I must give that some focus. But having said that, the interesting thing about the economic relationship between us is that we've come used to talking simply about trade, but not about investment. If you take the total package of trade and investment, the biggest relationship we have economically is with the United States, not with anyone else. They may not be the principal trading partner or the most beneficial one, But in trade and investment, the total economic package, they are our most significant partner.
Well, it's your job to keep all this sweet and make it even sweeter,
Right.
and you buckle up and head over there tomorrow. Kevin Rudd, Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, was a diplomat. We all know that. He was also the Foreign Affairs spokesman when in opposition, when you were leader and at other times. Do you think that experience, that background will be limiting or liberating for you as the ambassador?
Very liberating. The fact that the Prime Minister is so heavily internationally engaged, I think without argument you can say about the current Prime Minister, none in our memory, or probably none at all, has been as emphatic about Australian national interests being determined by how we participate in the global community. The fact that Kevin Rudd has that approach is both challenging because it means that you have a very extensive agenda, but also liberating because you know that when you're talking to your American counterparts about issues which we find important, we really do find them important, and the Prime Minister is engaged.
Your predecessors, talking about you on the job, had very different styles. Andrew Peacock was a very well-known and very successful diplomat and a very high-profile diplomat around Washington, I'm told. The current ambassador, Dennis Richardson, was more behind the scenes in approach. How do you think you'll be conducting yourself?
Look, I think Dennis and before him Michael Thorley were very intensely engaged on the nuts and bolts, and Andrew Peacock very intensely engaged on the
Personal
overt character of the relationship. All in their own styles, all did extremely well. The truth of the matter is this is not a political sinecure. Generally speaking, the people who are ambassador to the United States are capable of handling the bureaucratic aspects of an intensely detailed relationship. That's my challenge. This is normally and most effectively handled by a senior public servant. And I have to put myself back into harness again, think back about a decade or so, when I was engaged as a minister, to get the right work patterns and expectations in mind.
And there's a question, even though you talked about the closeness of the relationship and the relationship being ever changed in terms of the degree of that closeness, nevertheless, President Obama has just received a pretty loud and clear message from the voters in the United States that they want him to focus on them and their economic problems, not so much on the rest of the world, not so much on the Middle East, not so much on the wars and climate change. Do you think that makes your job harder to get the administration's attention?
Well, I think one thing you can guarantee that President Obama comprehends, and that he's got to be able to chew gum and walk at the same time. The Americans are global leaders. Brand America, and that has an economic consequence in its success. Brand America is a global brand. And American success globally means jobs locally. Now, President Obama comprehends that. And so even whilst he is talking jobs and talking the agenda that means something for many, many American voters, he comprehends to succeed with that agenda, he has to be globally engaged. So I'm not too worried about it.
You'd have to concede it's a different kind of atmospheric, though, than when John Howard was Prime Minister and the ambassador there was working, they were parts of the coalition, the willing. There was very open door policy for Australian diplomats then.
Well, it's terrific in times of prosperity, and we hope those times of prosperity will return. That certainly uncomplicates your agenda. Ours is rendered far more complex by the fact that we have to use the global architecture, if you like the G20, which Kevin Rudd's had a great deal to do with in getting up as a major forum for exchange of views. The tough times are, I think, are more interesting challenges.